Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech news in Asia. Today is Monday, the 16th of March, 2026. Let's get right to it. We want to talk about a big topic today, AI models or enabled shopping. What is more likely in Southeast Asia? At the end, we will also be joined by Ternes, CTO APAC at SS&C Blue Prism, to explore how intelligent automation platforms are helping companies transition from traditional RPA, robotic process automation, to more autonomous workflows. And finally, we will be joined by Dr. Joshua Kettlewell, a co-founder and CTO at Staple, to talk big picture about the shift from pre-LLM AI to where we are today and where we may be headed as the AI story continues to develop. Let's just talk about this topic. Southeast Asia's best AI bet may be shopping. Not shocking, actually, and not building the next OpenAI. I think there's a tendency when we talk about artificial intelligence to talk, particularly today, right, to talk almost exclusively about models. Who has the biggest model? Who has the smartest model? Who has the most, who has the cheapest model? Who is winning the race to build some regional version of OpenAI? And frankly, we saw this when DeepSeek came out. Now, I know DeepSeek is not in Southeast Asia per se, but sometimes some of these Chinese companies, they move their domains to, they move their locations to Singapore. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But I think in Southeast Asia, asking these questions about LLMs and who has the best model may be the wrong question. And whether somebody, look, we were shocked when DeepSeek came out. It's almost over a year ago now. It was very surprising to see like the small level of resource that they claim that they committed to building this pretty effective model. But in Southeast Asia, we're really going to see this. You really have to go and ask yourself this question. What we've seen in the United States per se, particularly when it comes to Anthropic, but almost more so when it comes to OpenAI, is this kind of nation-state style investing. Just throwing a ton of money. I think the most recent round was, $110 billion? SoftBank, NVIDIA, and I can't remember who the third investor was in OpenAI, about $110 billion. This is industrial style, long-dated CapEx that it would just be hard-pressed to see this happening outside of China and in one of the countries in Southeast Asia. It's not a knock on Southeast Asia. It's just that where would those resources come from? And I think more importantly, the most commercially important AI story in Southeast Asia may not be about building frontier models at all, right? That may not even be the case. It may be about something much more practical. And isn't that the thing we think about in Southeast Asia? It's just so much more practical here. Practicality kind of reigns supreme. And I think that if we do that, if we focus on the thing that's more practical here, it'll be much more immediate and much easier to monetize. And it's in the title. I think that that's shopping. And more specifically, the idea that Southeast Asia may make real money from AI first through whether it's just straight up e-commerce, discovery around e-commerce, logistics, payments, and seller tools for those sellers that are sitting on these e-commerce platforms like Lazada, like Shopee, like TikTok Shop, and frankly, even on Facebook. I think there's still a large amount of stuff that actually gets transacted on Facebook. And don't forget about Instagram as well. And I think it's much more likely that that's going to happen rather than a creation of some of these foundational sort of LLMs and big models. And that is why a recent partnership, and we spoke about this a little bit, I think a few days ago, or maybe a week or so ago, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. But that is why the recent partnership between Google and SEA, that's a company, SEA. Again, I don't know why they've named themselves this. They had a perfectly good name before, Garena. Let's just say that SEA is the parent company of Shopee. And I think that this partnership matters way more at first glance than any other sort of desire to build a foundational or a frontier model. Reuters reported that the two companies will work on AI tools for e-commerce and for gaming, where a lot of commerce also takes place online. Right? You can't think of the game as just a game. There's all this in-game commerce. I mean, that's how some of these games make most of their money, right? Including what they called together with this partnership, an agentic shopping prototype for Shopee, right? Reuters also noted that Shopee held a 52% share of Southeast Asia's e-commerce market in 2024, according to Momentum Works. And this is not like a science project. This is a real thing that's really happening between two big, actually really dominant companies. And don't forget about this. This announced partnership between Google and let's just say Shopee, one, easier to pronounce, two, easier to reference, and three, C, just sounds like you're talking about the ocean. We don't have to talk about that anymore. I'm just going to say Shopee from now on. Okay. But this idea that this announced partnership between these two companies is the only thing that's going to be happening in the agentic AI or in the AI enhanced or enabled shopping space. Again, we talked about payments, logistics, all this stuff is going to happen here. This is going to be way more easier to monetize, I think, than going out and building a foundational model. And the thing that they're doing is they're pointing this AI at one of the biggest digital commercial services in the region. And I think that distinction really matters. Now, remember, that is Google and Shopee, but every other company that's going to do this, you can't tell me that TikTok Shop is not working on some sort of AI enhanced or AI enabled shopping technology. I just can't believe that that's true. We haven't really mentioned Lazada either, but I must believe that they're working on it as well. This is just the first announced partnership. But again, it's indicative. It's a proxy, I think, for everything else that's going on out here. Look, Southeast Asia has a particular digital character. It's young, mobile-first, socially networked, highly price-sensitive, and deeply fragmented across languages, markets, payment systems, and logistics environments. I want to talk about this price-sensitive thing. I literally have a friend, I know somebody who refuses to go to dinner unless there's some kind of promotion. Okay? Unless there's some kind of promotion. We call this person PG. Promotion girl. Anyway, this is true, I think, for a ton of people in Southeast Asia, not just true for my friend group. And those conditions are difficult if you're trying to build a unified frontier AI company from scratch, right? Because all those things coming together say, wait, where are we actually going to use this? Where are we going to attack the economy with artificial intelligence? But those components as well, if you look at it in reverse, are extremely fertile, much better positioned if you're trying to apply AI to messy real-world buying behavior. And that's what e-commerce is. In other words, in Southeast Asia, in this region, may be better positioned to use AI than to invent the most advanced general-purpose AI models, just to use it and not to try to reinvent it and reinvent the wheel when it comes to large language models. And to be fair, I don't think this is a weakness per se, at least not in the short to medium term, particularly if you're looking to monetize, right? In fact, this may be a real advantage. Think about what shopping in Southeast Asia actually looks like. It's not just a search box and a checkout button. It's live commerce, creator influence, chat-based selling, small merchants, fragmented fulfillment, all this kind of stuff, right? Promotional intensity and constant competition for attention. Let me tell you this. If you're sitting on the BTS or on the MRT or on a bus in Bangkok, where I live, and I'm pretty sure this is true in every big city in Southeast Asia. I bet it's true in Jakarta. I bet it's true in Ho Chi Minh. I bet it's true in Hanoi, in Manila. Okay, and I bet it's true in Singapore as well. In the old days, I think if you go back 6-7 years ago, you would see people on their phones playing games. I don't want to go as far back as Candy Crush, but you know what I mean. If you looked at somebody on the bus, they're like, why is that person playing games? Look over their shoulders now. I mean, don't be weird about it, but just check it out. Do a little bit of your own research. They're probably shopping. And even if they're not shopping per se, they're probably on Instagram looking at things to shop for. Or maybe they're on Shopee as well. Maybe they're trying to entertain themselves with shopping. But I think it's moved from pure gaming only into, I'm just going to sit here and I'm on the bus or I'm on the train. I'm just going to do some shopping, right? And this is a market where that type of discovery and trust about who the seller is are almost as important as price. I do spend a lot of time in my friend group talking about fraud. I know people that have been scammed online. So the more that AI can come on and help identify who the scammers are and who the fraudsters are as well. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but I think that's going to be important as we move forward, making people feel safer about the shopping they're doing online, particularly as they're doing it across multi-platforms. Okay, it's also a market where millions of small sellers, this is what I was talking about Facebook earlier, right, are not looking for like abstract AI capability. They're looking for like real concrete things. Let's think about what those things might be. But if you're an individual seller, how can I write stuff that's going to give me better listings? Can I improve my ad targeting? Can I use it to answer customer questions? Can I forecast them? Like all these little things that I want to do that are going to help me be a better seller. Can it actually help me close a transaction? Like that's where the money's going to be, I think, when it comes down to where is AI going to be used to build this stuff and to help sort of, like I said, enable e-commerce. And the competitive backdrop in Southeast Asia makes this even more interesting. Reuters reported this month that the parent company to Shopee, I don't want to say C, that their shares fell sharply after cost rose. We talked about this. And management guided to slower Shopee GMV growth, with TikTok Shop explicitly part of the pressure story. We talked about this. Go back and watch, I think it's last week's episode of ATP Insights. You'll see we spent a lot of time digging into this. Get more information there. So C is investing heavily in logistics and delivery as it tries to defend market share and improve the user experience. Always going to be important in Southeast Asia. Service matters a lot. Reuters also noted that the parent company to Shopee is placing some pretty big bets on artificial intelligence. And again, this is going to cut into their margins, at least in the short to medium term, as they're making an investment. Okay. And they're investing particularly in search and advertising, how to make the ads better, how to make the ads better targeted, and how to make search better. In other words, I hate going on to a platform like Shopee, searching for something that I know is there, 100% know is there. Either I've purchased it before, or just by definition, it has to be there because it's such a popular product and I can't find it. This is not good. And this whole conversation we've been having right now about what's going to happen in Southeast Asia's AI market, particularly as it pertains to shopping, this gives us the real frame. Southeast Asia's e-commerce war is no longer just about subsidies, vouchers, and delivery speed. It is becoming a contest over who can build the most intelligent commercial environment, not just who sells or who lists the most product, but who reduces friction most effectively. Again, online commerce was supposed to make shopping easier, not harder and more frustrating. But I want the platform on which I'm operating to understand what I'm trying to do. I want it to understand my intent. Right? If I'm looking for a specific product for a specific brand, don't clutter my screen. Whether it's my phone screen, my iPad screen, or my desktop screen, don't clutter it with things about which I did not ask. Don't do that to me. Okay, and I always say, even in the startup world, so many people say that like product market fit is the most important thing. I would argue about this, and I have for years, almost a decade now. I think the more important thing is discovery, because you have to find the company first. Then you can determine like whether the product fits you and you're part of that market. But even if the product market fit is perfect, even if the product is perfect, and I'm digressing a little bit, but I want to make this point, if nobody can find you, it doesn't matter. Same thing with online shopping. If I can't find the product I want, even if I'm pretty sure that it's on the platform, I can't purchase it. Okay? And if that is the competition, we know that AI is going to be central to this. And this is not happening. I already mentioned this, right? Like this thing is not happening in isolation. Google is working with Shopee, but Alibaba has also been pushing new AI models and explicitly describing some of them as built for the agentic AI era. And if Alibaba is working on it, it's going to filter into Lazada, which bought Alibaba, I don't know now, 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was, but a while ago. And Reuters linked Alibaba's release directly to the growing push to commercialize artificial intelligence beyond chat and into real tasks. So here's the thing. A company like Alibaba, right, who has a massive and dominant position in China, also has a ton of money. So if they're going to invest in this, they're going to invest big in it. And they can take a really long-term view on this as well. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said, if Google is announcing something with Shopee, it's very likely that some of these other big companies like Lazada are working with their partners or other frontier AI or frontier model partners to build agentic AI shopping into their platforms. Okay. So what we're seeing here is a major global and regional tech companies treating Southeast Asia as a proving ground. This is why the Alibaba thing matters so much for applied AI commerce. Google, the same thing. This is a very different proposition from saying that the region will produce the next frontier model champion, which I argue with you is just not going to happen. I really do. Because building a world-class foundation model business requires extraordinary concentrations of compute, right? Capital, data infrastructure. The policy support is not something I'm so worried about. I think that the regulatory environment, particularly in Singapore, is just so pristine. It is very forward-looking. It's very progressive. And I have complete confidence, actually, in the Southeast Asia's regulators, regardless of the country, actually, to be fair, to be very open-minded about how to adapt new technology, but put the right guardrails in place as well so nobody gets hurt. They're very concerned about scams and fraud. But I don't think that, so the policy stuff is not what I'm worried about. And Southeast Asia does have talented founders, and we know that they have strong digital adoption. Everybody has a smartphone. Smartphone penetration, not just in Thailand where I live, but across the region, is super high. Okay. But it's an uneven capital environment. And I think this is one of the things that I was talking about at the beginning of this conversation, and that is, where are all these resources going to come from? So Deal Street Asia reported that startup funding in Southeast Asia dropped 94% in February, after rising a little bit in January, driven largely by a single multi-billion-dollar data center deal that we also talked about, I believe, on ATP Insights. So if the capital base is still fragile, and I think it is, what's the best path? Well, the best path is probably, as I mentioned earlier, not trying to outspend OpenAI, not trying to outspend Google, Anthropic, Alibaba, or TikTok Shop on frontier models. Don't even try. Again, because just the sheer amount of money that's getting dumped into this space in the West, as I said, is industrial style investment with a very long-term view. Nation states invest like this. Companies don't normally do this. This is not venture style investing. So don't even think about it. Which venture capital company in Southeast Asia, or even which country, right, is going to take $110 billion, or consortium of countries is going to take $110 billion and invest it into one company? I just don't see it happening. So probably in Southeast Asia, building products that sit on top of AI and plug directly into commercial behavior are much more likely. And eventually, genuine agentic commerce, where software does more of the shopping and the workflow on your behalf, is much more likely to happen, as I said, than somebody coming up and building a big foundational frontier model here. Okay, and this point is actually really important. If agentic shopping actually works, even in limited form, it changes the unit economics of digital commerce. Search becomes way more contextual, something I've mentioned already. Discovery should become more personalized, not creepy, but more personalized. Advertising itself should become more performance-oriented and also more targeted. The advertising should be able to understand who's actually intending to buy a certain product and then showing you that product at the time where it's most relevant, right? And the marketplaces themselves should become less of kind of like a static catalog of products and more of like an adaptive commercial marketplace. And that has consequences not just for the platforms, but for brands, for merchants, logistics providers, and fintech companies as well. And again, all these things are going to get integrated. Like a fintech company is not separate from an e-commerce company. It feels like it might be, but the fintech company itself is providing payment services to e-commerce, which means it's not separate. Same thing for the logistic providers, and same thing for the fintech companies in relation to logistics providers. Maybe I pay my logistic provider with the fintech company with whom I'm working. This matters, again, for merchants and for brands. And remember, in Southeast Asia, commerce is never just pure e-commerce, okay? It, again, is connected to payments, wallets, lending, delivery networks, creators, data centers, and increasingly, as I just mentioned, embedded financial services. And once AI improves the quality of buying intent, it potentially increases and improves everything around it, right? So let's stop treating Southeast Asia as like a pure model race, because I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is actually a distraction. And let's pay attention to infrastructure that improves transactions, not just interactions. A chatbot's super interesting. It was super interesting a year and a half ago, I would say. But a system that increases conversion, reduces the cost of customer acquisition, improves fulfillment and logistics, or even lifts merchant productivity, that's a real business, okay? And that, I think, is the deeper point here. Okay, let's move on. Let's welcome Dan Ternes into the show in a moment. Okay, let's go. We are welcoming Dan Ternes, CTO, APAC at SS&C Blue Prism. We wanted to have Dan on the show because we wanted to explore how intelligent automation platforms are helping companies, real institutions, transition from traditional RPA to autonomous workflows. And before we do that, Dan, maybe you can give us a little bit of background about SS&C Blue Prism, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. Well, actually, I guess there's two important backgrounds there, I suppose, because there's the Blue Prism part and there's the SS&C part. Right?
Perfect.
And lots of people know about Blue Prism. Fair to say, we kind of invented the RPA market We certainly invented the term RPA, and we've been a leader in that market really since its inception.
Awesome.
And in a nutshell, that RPA market, there's many different varieties of integration. There's many different varieties of ways to move information around and get information into systems, which is fundamentally what we're about doing. And a lot of them are very complex, and particularly they're complex when you're dealing with old legacy systems and what have you. And so Blue Prism and the RPA market took this very different approach of trying to create this software, essentially a software agent, a digital worker, call it a robot, call it what you will, that could emulate a human being interacting with an application on their computer. And so it was a very different approach to integration. It kind of became the lowest common denominator of everything. And that was sort of the RPA market. And it really caught fire. It's offered an option for people to automate processes and automate applications they just simply couldn't do before. And so the whole market really caught fire. And for probably 10 or 15 years, Blue Prism and RPA was the hot kid on the block. We were the most exciting thing out there to a large extent. You look like you want to ask a question.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is just the perfect segue, right? Like, you set this up so perfectly, right? Because one of the things, if I understand this correctly, what you said is Blue Prism's approach to RPA was different than other companies' approaches, where they're just trying to set up maybe processes, but you're trying to mimic human behavior. So I have to presume when you saw agentic AI being developed, or at least coming out, you're like, oh, I can see how this is going to fit into what we already know how to do in a way that may have been easier for you guys than it might have been for some other company that was trying to do it as well. Does that make sense?
I don't know if it's necessarily easier for us.
Go ahead.
Certainly, your basic premise there, that we saw large language models, we saw Gen AI, and frankly, like lots of people, the eyes lit up and said, well, hang on a second.
Right.
This gives us scope to do a lot of the things that were in the too hard basket before.
Yeah.
They were just, you'd like to be, it's a business problem. We'd like to be able to solve the business problem, but it's a sort of problem that really does require human evaluation, human intelligence. There's no two ways around it. And so therefore, we either couldn't automate the entire end-to-end process, or just portions of it, or we'd require humans involved in that. And once we saw that there's this capability to, in effect, understand language, both understand language and produce content, well, now certainly a lot of the edge cases start to become in scope. And so absolutely, the eyes certainly did light up. We can come back to that, but I want to also talk about the SS&C side of things, because this is important as well to the conversation.
Go ahead.
I think, right?
Yep.
Not as many people know about SS&C as perhaps knew about Blue Prism, or perhaps within their bubble. Maybe your audience knows about them better, being the financial services world. But
yep.
SS&C is a massive financial services company. Our core business is offering back office and middle office services to financial services companies, asset managers, hedge funds, private equity, etc. So in effect, there's the portion of our business that is software and software products. A lot of those products then support the back office and middle office business, where we are doing transactions on behalf of clients with client money, reconciling transactions, all sorts of things like that, right? And so too, now of course, one of the rationales, I think, for SS&C acquiring Blue Prism about 3 years ago is they saw the opportunity to apply the opportunities, the benefits of automation to that back office business. So, and we've been very successful with that. But so too, when LLMs, AI, etc., comes up, we say, hang on a second, this can also automate or sort of enhance so much of what we haven't been able to automate in the back office. So there's really, for us, a dual benefit from both sides of the organization, being able to build more solutions for customers over this way on the Blue Prism software developer side of things, but also to be able to offer faster, better, cheaper, more efficient services to the financial services clients on this side of the fence. So it's been very beneficial for us overall as a
My
company.
mind is racing. You may or may not know this, but I spent most of my career at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, so completely understand like this idea of providing software and services to banks and other financial institutions and where all that stuff fits in. But
Hmm.
this concept of then adding Blue Prism into it, where you're saying like all this sort of all the AI and the agentic AI stuff, then can take all the stuff that SS&C was doing and almost like turbocharge it in a way, right? And I can just see, you said everyone's eyes lit up. I can see that happening, and I love the metaphor there, because once you see that ability to do agentic AI, you can't unsee it. And I can just imagine adding that into like all these places where you guys provide services. It must be kind of exciting in a way, no?
It absolutely is. And in fact, the our CEO is also still the founder.
Oh wow.
Or I suppose still the CEO is the other way around. Bill Stone. He was quoted in the media the other day as saying this technology, so this combination of Blue Prism and AI, has basically created $1 billion in additional revenue and cost savings for the company over the past 3 years. I
Oh
mean, it's quite
wow.
an incredible. Yeah, exactly. It's more than just an illusory or ephemeral benefit of everybody's got a more interesting life and work-life balance. It's real tangible savings, and I think that's one of the things that's actually been. If we get in a conversation about AI, I think that's one of the things that's actually been a little bit missing from the world of AI in corporates up till now. I think there's lots of organizations who talk about their adoption of AI, and hasn't it been wonderful? And we do lots of things with AI, and AI is everywhere in our organization.
Right.
But I think they use, but okay, so that's on one side of it. And on the other side of that, there's lots of research. There's lots of, let's call it objective research, objective media articles, etc., that start saying there's lots of usage of AI, but there's not a lot of ROI from AI.
Yeah.
There was a famous, semi-famous, I suppose, research that came out last year from MIT that said 95% of Gen AI initiatives have delivered zero, like not a
Zero.
little, zero ROI, and that's quite a provocative and confronting sort of statistic, right? Now they may be wrong, maybe it's only 85, but substantially organizations have struggled to deliver true, tangible, dollars in your back pocket benefits from these sort of technologies. And I think that's sort of where both Blue Prism with our technology and SS&C with our experience and what we're doing, I think that's where we've been sort of a little bit different.
So I want to put this all in context, if you don't mind, and tell me where I'm getting something wrong. But I feel like I've seen, I don't know, 4 or 5 gigantic big tech cycles. This is one of them. But I want to say which one of them wasn't actually real, and that was this whole idea about the metaverse, right? Because you actually made this distinction. No, you're smiling, right? But you know what I mean, in the sense that, every time there's a shiny new object out there, every big institution goes, okay, we have the metaverse everywhere now. I mean, even Facebook changed their name to Meta, which in retrospect looked kind of ridiculous to me. But in this case, the artificial intelligence stuff to me is so obviously transformational, so obviously going to make a difference, right? That you're right. And I always say this on my show a lot, like we're in the early innings of it. So maybe it's only 5% of the stuff that's actually giving like a tangible ROI, but the ROI is going to be there. Whereas the stuff with the metaverse was just like, what are we doing? Anyway, just for you to put like my thought process into context, what does it, sorry, go ahead.
I can always comment on people's comments.
Yeah, go ahead. Please feel free, man. Go ahead.
I'll make a couple of comments about that. I absolutely agree that the ROI can be there. This is not illusory at all.
No.
But it's got to become industrialized. I think when organizations use this in sort of an ad hoc manner, as kind of, I've got a digital assistant sitting behind me and I can ask ad hoc questions at an ad hoc time to get an ad hoc answer. That's nice, but that's nice for me. I don't know that necessarily rolls up to value for the organization. I can market it as such, but in reality, if I'm looking at your annual report, point out where in these figures the value comes from. Right? I think you've got to industrialize it. I think organizations are maybe struggling is too strong a word, but recognize that I can't just industrialize it just by wishing it so. It requires changes to operations. It requires a real rethinking of how we do governance for this. And there's a lot of challenges of getting it right. So it doesn't just happen because you wish it so. And look at SS&C, we use a lot of it, but it didn't just happen because we wish it so.
No,
right?
no. Right.
There's a lot of work to make that work. So that's sort of one aspect to it. The other aspect, though, is you talk about cycles and hype and the metaverse being a hype.
Please, yeah.
I don't think this is going to end up being hype.
No.
But at the moment, there's a little bit of hype to it. And what I mean by that is when you hear the analysts talking, and when you hear, let's call it the investor community talking, the people who's have vested interests in kind of promoting and the success of this, they're pitching a vision. And I think that vision is realizable, but it's not there today. I think what we're doing today is a step on the way to the full vision. So you do have to sort of bear that in mind. The story of fully autonomous agents making decisions about doing that's for the future. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a stepping stone. I don't think we see a lot of that there today.
Can we talk about this industrialization, if you don't mind? And I'll tell you why. I've spent a lot of time over the past month or so saying that like the type of investments that are getting made, particularly like, let's just use OpenAI as an example, $110 billion, Amazon, SoftBank, NVIDIA, like dropping $110 billion. This is not even like venture style investing anymore. This is more like nation state kind of investing. But what in your mind, let's just get into the weeds a little bit here. What does industrialized, enterprise ready kind of agentic or just AI in general look like? And if you want to use the banking and finance industry as an example, it's perfect for me because I can dig deep into that with you. But what does it really look like when you say it needs to be industrialized?
It means it needs to be, in effect, an automated process. Rather than sort of saying Dan does things every now and again, I mean to say that all of our customer onboarding goes through a standardized process that has agents and other technologies at various stages. And the whole thing is done by agents. Now, sure, humans may be a resource in that flow. I think humans will always be involved in process at some point. Yeah. But the point is, everything, it's a funnel. Everything funnels through this same standardized process that brings it to bear all of my first-class resources, my first-class citizens, be they humans or agents or digital workers or APIs or whatever, and I end up with a result at the end. It's an industrialized production line. That is when I can very, very truly calculate tangible benefits from that. That's what I mean by industrialized, rather than just sort of this ad hoc, look, you've got an assistant, use it if you want to use it, don't use it if you don't want to use it. But I'm truly changing the nature of work. I'm not trying to just sort of do what I do today and do a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'm fundamentally changing the nature of work.
So
that's what I sort of think of as industrialization. And it's not just how the work happens from step A to step B to step C to step E.
Yeah.
It's also, well, how does my organization need to change its oversight, its control, its governance, its compliance, so that when the regulator comes knocking and says,
and they will,
"Here, Michael, why did you do that?" that they can say, "Oh, geez, I don't really know. The agent did it. It just does stuff, right? It's magic." I don't think that's going to be a very acceptable answer.
No,
right?
It's not. So, I was thinking in my head, that's not a good answer. No way.
Of course, right? So you need to have figured out, how am I going to answer those sort of questions? How am I going to prove to the powers that be that I'm acting in the best interest of my customers. I'm acting according to the rules and regulations that get applied. And a lot of those rules and regulations are kind of like, the do no evil type rules, and they're not so much things I can follow. I have to act. I have to act well, and then later someone will tell me if I didn't act well. So I've got to be ahead of the game, and that's what I think a lot of organizations have to rethink in order to industrialize this sort of stuff.
So again, I said we're at the early innings of this, but there are companies doing this that are doing it really well. Your clients, right, that take this technology and say, I think we know how to use this internally and actually do this industrialization that you were talking about. And to be fair, I told you this. I worked at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs for most of my career. And one of the things that I did was I was on and I ran a portfolio trading desk. So a lot of that had algorithmic trading associated with it, which meant that we industrialized our ability to, and it did change the way we worked, by the way, to actually execute trades. Because in the old days, we'd have to like hand slice them. We'd have to watch all this stuff and do all these things. But the algo, which essentially was an agentic AI back in the day, although a slightly more primitive one than what we have today, it would go out and do all the trading on its own, and it would watch the market, and it would come back with signals and do stuff like that. But it was really industrialized, and it changed. I want people that hear this to understand like what it means and what the significance is. We literally went from trading like $250 million a day to trading like $3 to $4 billion a day, because our workflows completely changed. Our workflows were completely automated, and the scale at which we could operate. And this gets back to this ROI thing that you were talking about before. If you actually implement it in an industrialized way, it changes everything about the way you work and the output that you have. And I'm curious if you've actually seen some firms that you work with. I don't care who they are, but like, what are the ways that the best firms out there are thinking about this? Because they know they've already automated some of the processes previously with RPA, but what are the best firms thinking about? Okay, wait a second. If I automate this stuff, where are the best places to do it? But then the second thing is, like you said, how are they handling this problem of who's responsible for it if the agent does something that maybe I can't explain 100%? Like who's liable if something goes wrong? And then what kind of governance stuff do we need to put in place to be able to do this? What are the best firms out there thinking about this?
So I'll give you a little bit of a teaser for my answer to the second question. I think they're learning that now. They're learning that now.
Yep.
And that then kind of comes back to sort of the first question of what are people doing now? I think what most the organizations who are kind of moving from RPA to agentic AI, I think it's fair to say that what they're doing is they are augmenting their existing processes with AI. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yep. That's okay. That's step number one.
Yep.
That's how SS&C started as well. You say we were augmenting a lot of our existing processes with AI, and that's good because when we're automating a business process, as much as we'd like to say, yeah, we were doing an end-to-end business process, the reality is it probably wasn't an end-to-end business process.
Right.
Maybe it was the 75% of the stuff in the middle, right? And there was, I don't know, do the mathematics, 20% of the stuff on the inputs and 5% of the stuff on the outputs. That's the full end-to-end, but we were just doing 75 in the middle.
Yep.
The reason why we couldn't do all of the stuff at either end, perhaps on the input, there's a lot of triage that comes into it. I'm needing to take information from an email, understand what the email's asking. Is it an A or a B or a C or a D? Need a human to do that. Once the human makes those decisions and perhaps grabs some data from a lot of very unstructured documents, that's the 20%. Feed that into my automated process. Great, do all of that. And at the end, perhaps we're writing an email back to the client. RPA wasn't in a position to do that triage piece, that extracting data from unstructured documents, that creating content, creating email responses back. So you were doing it. So step number one, we can expand out that scope further. Maybe it's still not 100%, maybe it's 95% now, but we're expanding the scope horizontally is one of the things that you see happen a lot. And in that, there's a lot of that extracting data from unstructured sources, email triage, unstructured documents, contracts, things like that have traditionally proven very difficult for not just RPA, but really any technologies to be able to extract information from faithfully and reasonably. We're very good at forms, same information, but unstructured content, very hard. Right? So there's that, the expanding out this way. The other thing I'd say is in this AI augmented piece is we'd always say, look, it's the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, right? My digital workers are going to do the 80% of the stuff that is the stock standard transactions, the happy path transactions. And when there are some variances, there are some exceptions, there are some complicated cases, that then drops out to the human, and the human completes that. And so there's this mix of human and digital workers working together to get the full job done. Maybe now it's not the 80-20, maybe it's the 90-10, right? I can expand up that stack as well. And some of the things that in the past, again, had to be passed to humans, some of those judgments, some of those reasoning, some of those decisions can be taken by agents, and again, reduce that footprint. So that's how I see a lot of work happening today. And I'll give you some examples.
Please.
Some of those are from SS&C, and I think we can speak. Easy for us to speak about SS&C because we don't have confidentiality.
Exactly. You're allowed to do this, so it's perfectly fine.
Well, exactly, right. But I think these are examples that are they're applicable across the board, right? There's nothing special about what we do with them, and I think they're representative. When I look at how our customers are using AI together with Blue Prism to increase, they're doing a lot of this sort of stuff. So things like, so one of our most sort of, highest interest. There's a huge amount of interest from customers. If you're doing that, tell us how. We do huge amounts of, or I don't say huge amounts, huge commercial real estate credit agreements in America. We underwrite such a huge portion of the market of commercial real estate credit agreements. They're 500-page documents.
Wow.
We have to extract out 40 or 50 or 60 different data points from those documents. Things like, what's the amortization schedule? Who are the parties to the agreement? What is obviously interest rates and things like that. But it's not just, that's hard enough, but it's not just from a single contract. It's a contract with multiple tranches, and each tranche has got its own interest rates and its own amortization schedules. And you've got to pull all this information out and synthesize it together before you can hope to update any downstream systems or do any work with it. And that is something that a human would have to do.
Yeah, I was thinking in my head, like, there was no way that an RPA could have done that because it doesn't understand context at all and it can't read through the document. Sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah, there was no way that was possible.
You're exactly right. Well, we do that with agents today. We have LLM sitting in our private data, private cloud, private data center that extract all of that data.
Wow.
All day, every day. We've got ones like a collateral margin agent that's taking emails that come in from the various counterparties to a trade or to an agreement, and extracting things like margin amounts and fund amounts and all the information that's needed to update our back-end financial systems. All of this stuff is all extracting data from documents. We do a lot of that. And it's almost like we have an idiom. Is it an idiom? I suppose. No human should read a document. We almost start with that perspective. Now, humans do need to read documents.
Sure.
It's one of those lofty goals.
Yeah.
We start with this idea that says, well, why does a human need to read this document? Can it not be done with an agent? And if we feel it can be done with an agent, we let an agent do it. So our use of agents internally is really proliferating, because so much of what we do is we've got 20,000 people sit in the back office that get documents and emails and shift paper around and extract data and update systems and so on and so on and so forth. Reconcile this against that against the other. So trade confirmations, cash reconciliations, collateral margin. We do invoice processing. We do things like partner capital statements, updates, and all this sort of jazz. We've got communication agents that then will respond back to clients in a particular voice, and in a particular voice that is per customer basis. If our client A wants to communicate in this sort of tone of voice, and client B wants to communicate in that tone of voice, we have to adjust our communications to suit that. So that flexibility is really key for us.
What is look, I do this, I use artificial intelligence every single day, and I can't imagine a world now where I didn't have access to it in a way that I didn't a year and a half ago, right? And you're right. Even when I'm writing things, I can change the tone of voice, I can change the all these things can be changeable. I don't use agents per se, although we're starting to in our business as well. Like I have agents go out and find interesting news to me, interesting tweets, all this kind of stuff that I need to be able to do my job in a way that's better, and I don't have to spend time doing it myself. I can just, like you said, go through and read it. Like there's no reason why. I love this idiom that you have of no human should ever have to read a document, because frankly, you're right. Like those documents, if they're 500 pages long, would take way too much time to read. The same way it would take me way too much time to run through everything that somebody said about technology and artificial intelligence on Twitter. It's just a waste of my time. But give me the 5 salient points in the same way that you said, like get the 40 to 50 data points out of here. It's unstructured, and make sure that I understand exactly what, and then pass it on to the next thing to make it easier to do. I love this idea. But on top of that, because you're in banking and finance, and you hinted at this earlier, but I'm curious if you can, again, dig a little bit deeper in this for me. It's heavily regulated. Like I know this again from my own experience, and believe me, I've sat in front of the regulators, both in the United States and in Japan. So I've sat in front of the FSA and had to answer questions about why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? But how much more complexity does it add on top of this when you're building these flows, when you're changing the way the model works, the business model works? How much more complexity does it add because it's so highly regulated?
It's a lot. Let me sort of come at this so I said AI augmented is how I see most people using AI today in the context of automation and RPA and the like.
Yeah.
And that's true. I don't think that's necessarily the sweet spot for what AI agents can offer organizations. The sweet spot starts to be when I say, hang on, what can I do what can I do now that I haven't, I'm not automating something that I already do. I'm creating something new. I'm building a process that I haven't done before because it wasn't possible before. That starts to be the sweet spot for it.
Yeah.
Because now I'm asking an agent to use judgment, perhaps, or to understand context, or to synthesize data, things that in the past we'd have to give to a human, but now an agent could do some of that. Or where I've got processes that they've got almost infinite variability. Every transaction needs to perhaps be handled in a slightly different way.
For sure.
And so decisions need to be made about what's the right way to handle that. Now, that's where, when I said before, the analysts are talking about a vision for agent. I think that's what they're talking about, those sort of things. And that is the sweet spot, but it's the future. Now, one of the things, and this gets to your question about, governance and compliance and what have you, because to do that correctly, now I definitely need to change my business model. And the big way I need to change that business model is around the question of governance and compliance, and who's monitoring the agents, who's overseeing the agents.
Right.
So I think there's two elements to this. One element of it, and this is something that we saw ourselves, and it's a technical element. It's a technical element of, okay, now everybody knows that I can call an LLM, from system A, can call an LLM, ask a question, get an answer, and that's a full 5 minutes of programming work. It's the easiest thing in the world.
Simple.
But we recognized early on that is not sufficient certainly, well, probably anywhere, but certainly not in working in regulated industries. And that if we wanted to be able to interact with LLMs, either LLMs in the cloud or LLMs on premise, there's a whole another set of questions there. We needed to be able to build in this technical governance layer that ensured that every transaction got applied the same guardrails to it, had the same audit controls put in place, had exactly this, ensured that personally identifiable information wasn't passed out to the cloud or to the LLM, ensured that there weren't prompt injection requests. And to do that in I'll use the word again, industrialized fashion, rather than sort of say, look, every developer who's out there building a little solution to a use case is coming up with their own version of governance, and have it be this hodgepodge of, we think we're following the rules, but we don't really know because everyone can do their own thing. We said, no, we're going to build this, and it's a technology layer. We call it our AI gateway, and it ensures that any interaction with an LLM, whatever that LLM happens to be, first goes through that gateway out to the LLM, back through the gateway, and then back to the application that requested it. And we can therefore assure that the controls that the company decides they want to put in place, whatever those controls happen to be, are guaranteed to be in place for every transaction that we want them in place for.
Right.
And that everything's audited, and that I can show you a chain of actions, I suppose, and conversations with LLMs. And I can go back through the whole history of that and know exactly why things were done and how they were done. So that's kind of at a minimum on a technology level. You need that layer. I think it's one of the things, I think lots of organizations have recognized that. And lots of organizations are saying, well, we need one of those too. And some organizations are buying them. Some organizations are building them. That's that standard equation in our world, right? Buy versus build.
Exactly.
And do I have to build, and so on and so on and so forth. But anyway, they know they need that in place. And I think that's one of the reasons that adoption of this stuff at an industrialized scale is somewhat lower than you might have expected, because people realize, well, hang on, I need all of these preconditions in place in order to do this safely. So there's a technology angle there. And then the other side to that equation of how do we address this sweet spot and what changes it mean to the organization? We're starting to think internally is like, perhaps this requires a whole rethink of the shared service center. And what will the shared service center of the future look like? Because today I've got a shared service center where an organization said, hey, you know how we can do this more efficiently with fewer errors and more cheaply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's centralize it. Let's offshore it. Let's standardize it. And hence the shared service center was born. Now, perhaps I don't need all those people tomorrow doing those standardized transactions, because we'll have agents that can do that just as well, if not better, than the human. So 2 thumbs up, great. But I don't think that shared service center goes away, because now what those people are, I think their role is, and we're starting to think their role is governance. Their role is compliance. Their role is that human oversight. Who's making sure that my agent that on day one is working just beautifully and answering everything correctly, that over time you don't get model drift? We know that happens. So who's assessing that in 6 months' time, on the first couple of weeks, got an A+ for both effort and result,
right.
And by 12 months later, suddenly it's making lots of incorrect decisions because models have drifted, and no one's really knows that. No one's identified that. How do I think, I've been saying this for a little while, I think what's holding a lot of organizations back from going with this is there's somebody that owns the business. I own the business unit. I'm responsible for the successful operation of this business unit. And I know that there's a big upside to using agents and AI. There's a big upside to LLMs. Wonderful. But I also know that there's a big downside of getting it wrong. And I know these things hallucinate. I know they make mistakes. And I don't need to be on the front page of the newspaper when I find out my agent did something wrong. And we all know they do. I don't think they're ever going to be perfect. But the secret to this is, how do I identify the false positives? It's the false positives that are going to kill you. Okay, the false positive. So how do I intercept those false positives? And if I'm the business owner, I want to know that I'm not prepared to let these things into my business until you can confirm for me and prove to me that you can identify the false positives and you can intercept what is effectively risky behavior. If you can intercept risky behavior, I'm all in.
So
right?
we have precedent for this as well. And again, if you don't, because I want the listeners and the viewers to understand that, like, what you're talking about is not something that hasn't been done before. My job as a sales trader did change a lot when we started using algorithmic trading. Again, it meant that instead of doing 3 trades a day, meaning 3 big trades a day, I could do 20. Right. And that's why the volume increased so much. That's why the dollar traded volume increased so much. But my job moved from having to make every little individual trading decision to just going, oh, don't do that, kind of, to the algorithm, in the same way that you're suggesting. And that was, again, it wasn't so much compliance, but sometimes it was. But it was really governing those agents and saying, that's not what you're supposed to do. And you're right. if for some reason there was bad data in there or was getting bad data and there was some sort of algorithmic drift, it was my job to stop it, figure out why, and fix it. So it switched from what I was doing before a little bit and then completely over once we started doing all the algorithmic trading. So it's the same thing. I just wanted to make it clear to people that like what you're suggesting is not something that's never happened before, and it's going to happen again in different sectors and different verticals. Yes?
Absolutely. But the key point is you need to have addressed, but to hit that sweet spot for agentic of I want autonomous agents making decisions, taking up more of that grunt work. There's a technical angle, there's sort of technical governance, and there's operational governance that needs to be put in place. That requires changes in business models. That requires a rethink of the roles of humans. That requires probably training those humans, and lots of things in between. And that will take time, but I think that's what organizations are working towards. And when they get there, it'll be a very powerful solution.
Very. I want to talk about one more thing and then I'll let you go. Do you want to talk at all about orchestration? Right. So I've spent a lot of time talking about payment orchestration, but I do think that there's a place to talk about orchestration in the context of agentic AI as well, and like how that itself is actually going to work too. And then I'll let you go.
Well, I think that orchestration is, it starts to be, well, in a sense, it's the secret sauce that holds it all together. I'm going to have a whole series of agents that have specialized skills, and something needs to coordinate all of those things. So I need a layer that's going to coordinate agents that have different capabilities, doing different things. I don't for a moment think that agents are going to do everything. So humans are going to remain as a first-class citizen in organizations. And in fact, there'll be plenty of AI regulations that come in place that say humans must do this, agents can't do this. We've seen Australia, for example, that's more in the government sector, but who knows where we'll end. After their whole robo-debt scandal, that created a whole bunch of regulations fundamentally of how governments need to automate work, and humans can insist upon processing by a citizen, and perhaps in this case a client can insist upon processing by a human. Maybe these things all happen. I don't think humans go away at all. So they have to be part of the story. They need to be orchestrated. There's lots of other resources that need to be orchestrated. We will continue to use good old RPA digital workers for years and years and years to come. They're not going to go away. It's another resource that needs to be orchestrated. So I have to have that orchestration layer. I also think that as much as we're all excited about autonomy, and this idea that we've had autonomy all your life. Humans are autonomous. They could have made any. Organizations don't want them to.
Exactly.
Organizations saying, we don't want you to be autonomous. We want this needs to be very deterministic. The same rule needs to be applied in the same way every time, faithfully, without exception, and without sort of outside. So processes, I think, are going to be a hybrid of activities that are very deterministic and activities that are very non-deterministic. And so all of that needs to be handled by this orchestration layer, not the least of which is I need something that can audit all of this, that can give me that, that 360-degree view of everything that's happening, that can sort of ensure compliance and accuracy and traceability and all these sort of, exception handling, all these sort of things. That all falls to the orchestration layer. So I think every agent you'll see is sitting within some orchestrated process that may be a small number of steps process or a very, very large process, but you've got to have that as well.
So I love this idea, and I'll let you go in a second, but I love this idea that like your boss never wanted you to be autonomous, not you, but like as a human, your boss didn't want you to be autonomous anyway, because they wanted to have final approval. Like I saw this every single day at work. It didn't matter where I was working. You're right. I could have complete autonomy. That never happens at work. And I can't imagine a situation where, as you said before, somebody owns the business, somebody owns the P&L, somebody owns the responsibility. And I don't think there's any way, like you said, that humans are going to go away. But then second of all, that they're going to give a process full autonomy to do anything, because they would never do that for a human. And I think that the digital world at some level is going to model the human in the physical world, because it's the only way we really understand ourselves, like how to interact, because there's fear there, right? If I give you full autonomy, I don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Yes, yes, indeed. And you don't have to spend a lot of time in the media at the moment to see stories about models refusing to follow instructions and models decide they're going to do things differently. Well, these are all the challenges we'll face, but certainly we have to guard against those possibilities, certainly. So
perfect.
This is all the job of us humans and our control plane, our control towers, shared service center control towers, to make sure that everything's happening according to the regulations, both sort of internal and governmental regulations that have been put in place.
Perfect. Okay, Dan Ternes, CTO APAC at SS&C Blue Prism. Now I know how all that stuff works together. You were awesome. I cannot thank you enough for doing this today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we are on. We have Dr. Joshua Kettlewell, a co-founder and the CTO at Staple, is joining us today. Should I call you Josh, Joshua, Doctor? What do you want me to call you while we're doing this, man?
Dr. Josh.
Dr. Josh is perfect.
Josh is fine.
Josh is fine. Okay. Josh, it's great to have you here. I really appreciate it. Look, let's just jump right into this thing. Before large language models became the center of the AI conversation, what did doing AI inside a real business actually mean in practice?
So maybe I'm a little bit on the wrong one, because I came in just as transformers were coming into play.
Go ahead. Okay.
So as we started Staple, transformers had just started. So we were seeing BERT and ALMO models, and how natural language processing was changing from using kits like Spatie and Python. And you could really see the ability to deal with text in complex ways. This is before GPT-3 came out, so you could see where things were going. But prior to that, we're mostly in natural language processing and image processing.
Right.
So the business applications of it were mixed. There was a little bit in recurrent neural networks a few years before we started, and neural networks for image detection, stuff like is this a picture of a face, identifying who it is, etc. Animal video processing, so animal detection and videos, image processing for identifying people doing things.
Yeah.
And then we had a lot of basic work in natural language processing for some obvious cases, such as AP invoice processing using keyword similarities.
Okay.
Some text processing for fast querying on large documents to find out areas which may be semantically related to a query. This was far below explainability. Those is the main applications that I saw in really advanced AI at that time. There was definitely some things happening in, anomaly detection, clustering, but I didn't see many of these applications in the areas that we were in, which is in document and file processing.
Right. Do you think that LLMs have changed what customers are willing to pay for on top of all the other changes that you just mentioned? Do you know what I mean? Because before, maybe it was harder for them to understand, but now it's so clear, particularly after the release, as you said, of GPT-3.
Yeah. I won't be the only person who says this, but AI has changed everything. It's but
it has, though. Like, I don't think it's weird, right? Like, you and I don't know how old you are, but I've seen tons of different tech cycles, and every time something new comes out, right, it's like I'll make a joke to you, you'll get this. It's like Linux on the desktop is going to change everything, kind of thing. But this really has changed everything. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. You think you're going to get over it, and you don't, and you think about it more, and it's moving faster and faster. Yeah. I used to have the opinion that enterprise sales cycles are long. I see how quickly they innovate. It's going to be 10 years until we see the big changes in society due to this. And after the models released in December and January, I brought that in from 2 to 5 years.
Did you really?
It's really terrifying. Yeah, so there was a very big possibility that a lot of B2B SaaS goes. And a lot of companies find themselves in a position of essentially being token marketplaces, which is a conversion of just, problems to tokens. It's tokens being the new currency of doing things.
Why do you, can I ask you this? So why, because I've heard all this, but I want to get my head around it. Why do you think B2B SaaS goes away, or at least gets minimized drastically?
It's enterprise, which is the big one. So the sales to mum and pop and small companies is not going to change. Like Xero is a good company, a good example. No one's going to go and replace Xero for their own use case. Especially it wasn't $50 a month. The bigger issues are things which are large but not quite infrastructure. If your sales cycle is long, there is now a real possibility that your enterprise client is going to look internally at what this software does and think, can I build it in a similar timeline? And the answer used to be definitely no.
Right.
Now it's not as clear. Now it's probably still no, but not a definite enough no that people aren't going to try it.
But do you think, sorry, because this is a really good point, but do you think that people are going to use, and I'm just going to use what exists today, but it's only going to get better, right? But do you think that people are going to use like Claude Opus 4.6 to say, I'm using this big piece of enterprise level software. I can have 5 people or whatever the number is internally, literally go out and recode this thing. I'm going to pick a random number because I don't know what it would be, but like in a week, and build enough functionality for me, meaning my enterprise, and over time just add things as I need to add it, as opposed to then going out and paying the monthly SaaS fee. Is that what we're suggesting is going to happen here?
Yes. Instead of big software which is customizable to a specific use case. Think SAP, view drop downs, etc. No, just build it specifically for your use case straight away. Weeks is not quite there yet.
I just picked a time.
Maybe a couple of months, and a good engineer in the background to look over what's happening and make sure it's scalable.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to be worrying for a lot of people unless they go all the way to B2C, open source, or in infrastructure, unless you've got really strong moats around your software.
So how would, and again, I'm sorry to keep asking you questions, but it's so interesting to me. I guess there are 2 things. How do you define what infrastructure is? Do you know what I mean? In the sense that you said for B2B SaaS stuff, that stuff could potentially go away. And unless it's infrastructure in the form of software, but how do you define what that infrastructure is? Like, how do I know?
Well, the first case would be physical, of course. We're not quite at the stage where AI has moved from creating digital to creating physical. You stick an AI 3D printer, that's one way. There is a layer of, it's a gray area. It is admittedly a gray area.
Go ahead.
Because I would consider advanced database systems to be infrastructure. The AI system is probably not going to recreate Mongo or Supabase. But frankly, it could.
It could though, right? Sorry, go ahead.
It's what you do now. Quickly, if you're doing, it's are we going to replace the tools that developers would use themselves? Developers don't use some number of tools when they are building software. They will use, for example, back in my day, we'd use Keras and TensorFlow. You pick up database like Mongo, you're using Kubernetes, you're using some open source things. I'd still classify some of these as infra. And what the AI is doing is replacing developers' job of using these things. It's also how AI is trained on code, which does this. But in the future, if you want to make your own database, I guess you can. It's not the most efficient way to solve the problem.
I was going to say, like, it seems more likely that they're going to write more bespoke software as opposed to, okay, now I see what you're doing and how you're categorizing infrastructure, right? So these big database things, it's like, why would you go out and reinvent the wheel there? Like, I don't know how expensive that database management software is. I mean, you have to pay something for it, right? But at some level, I think you'd rather maybe outsource, that is probably the wrong word, but allow it to keep running the way it's running and then focus on the stuff that's core to you. And then simple things like even like accounting, you said Xero before. Maybe you just write that stuff yourself. I don't know, but it'll be super interesting to see like how this stuff gets separated out. Why do you think, and again, I mentioned earlier, I've seen all these different tech cycles, right? But they all seem to move kind of at the same pace, if that makes sense. Like I could kind of tell like this is going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. But I feel like this AI stuff is just accelerating in a way that I've never seen before. And is it just a money and a resource allocation thing? Like I've done whole episodes saying that like the amount of money that's going into building this stuff and building it out, it's like nation state spending on, like you said, like on infrastructure, right? It's like building a road system or high-speed trains everywhere. It's so much money. Is it the money, or is it just that is it so meta that the AI is actually making building AI stuff faster because then you can attach the AI to it, if that makes sense? I mean, why is it moving so much faster?
Most of Claude Code and Codex were built with the internal tools developers. So Codex was built using OpenAI GPT-5 models primarily. And Claude Code was built using Claude Opus models.
Oh my God.
It's the utility of these, because these are, it's like when you get a big breakthrough in physics and you get such an unlocked abilities of things happening. You know, we understood quantum mechanics, and then suddenly we got transistors and LEDs, etc. This is as fundamental a building block in software, in all manner of technical aspects, that it just unlocks so many things to accelerate. It's pure utility.
I feel like we're, in a way, kind of fortunate to live during a time where this thing is unlocked. I don't want to make the analogy to nuclear power, but it's like once you understand how to split an atom, like nothing's ever the same again, right? Is that fair?
I think so. I feel like I've got potentially one of the world's last batch of good developers, because we all grew up writing code, you know, by hand on a keyboard without autocompletes, or even I wrote in Vim, so it's not even proper IDE, I'd say. But with abstracting away from that so quickly, I've looked at what my daughter's going to be like in the next 20 years. What do I tell her to study at university anymore? Like, should she do fine arts if AI can paint a picture? Should she study accountancy if AI can do the book so much quicker? Not that I'd ever encourage her to do accountancy anyway. So it's something that we've been automating anyway. So, you know, that one's,
I don't know. A lot of parents did tell their kids to go to accounting school because they would always have a job. Like they would never get super rich, but they'd never be poor, kind of thing. So who knows, right? But it's funny that you would say that. I would never tell her to do that.
It's gonna, but everyone will cope. It's like we did. Well, I did growing up with the internet. You know, I was there with the dial-up modem on it from first days.
Same.
Yeah. We all adapt.
I do think this is funny though. Like you're too young to know the movie, or at least to have seen it when it came out, The Graduate. Frankly, I'm too young to have seen it when it came out as well. But my parents used to talk about it. And one of the famous scenes in the movie was where I think it was the Dustin Hoffman character was being told by his father or some older friend of his, like, study plastics, go to university, study plastics, because like the petroleum economy was going to grow. This was in the 1960s, right? Mm-hmm. And even when I was
in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And the oil got crushed in the 70s. I was there for stagflation. I remember it. But when I was in high school, when I was graduating from high school, they would come into class and they would tell us, like, okay, if you want to study something that's going to future-proof your career, it was computer programming and computer science. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I knew the future, I'd be a richer man. All I can do is guess. You know, I wouldn't say to people there's no value in studying computer science, especially if you study the fundamentals of computer science. It isn't just code. It's you know, big notation, it's understanding, all the way down to assembly. It's understanding so many more things than just a language and how to write object-oriented code, and different frameworks. And there's still going to be a lot of cross-functional value from that. The same way, if you'd study maths or sciences at a higher level, or humanities, you can take that thinking, that experience, and take it across.
Yeah, I mean, look, I studied economics in college. I've never been an economist, but it did not hurt me to understand like how the economy worked, to be fair. And I don't think that's ever going to go away, right? So it's good for me to be able to understand that. I wanted to switch gears a little bit, right? Because I had a really interesting conversation recently with a co-founder and the CEO of Entra Security. And he quoted a statistic that said, and I didn't even know this was a thing, NHI, non-human identities. I'm sure you know this thing. But they did a report that says it outnumbers human employees by 144 to 1. And I'm just wondering, and I'm just wondering, like, what you think the impact or the implications of this thing are, not just from a security standpoint, but just from an idea that, like, people are rolling out these autonomous agents in a way, and not completely autonomous, but agentic AI in a way that, like, it's just so fast again. We already talked about the speed, but what do you think the implications of this? He said it was 144 to 1 right now, but he thinks that's going to accelerate even higher.
So what he'll be referring to there is, what I'm guessing is API credentials.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So there's so many people
tokens and stuff like that. Yeah.
So many people who have logins to software and so many actions being done by API credentials, which means that you've got other pieces of software talking to software. This was the big idea of Internet 2.0 and Internet of Things, that you can have connectivity across systems.
Yeah.
Which is going to come back in vogue, I really think. But now, I guess this from here, what the question is, are we going to see more of that and other risks? You will see more of that, and people will realize why the ability to talk to an application programming interface, an API, talk to a computer with code, why that's so powerful. Because you can do it with natural language from your screen now, as though you were talking to a person. So if you take the example of Xero, using Xero is like reading an accounting ledger. Very soon, with using AI, it is going to be more like talking to an accountant.
Yeah.
You talk to the system. That system interacts with Xero via Xero's API interfaces, and it is abstracted away. And that is the level of abstraction that developers are already in the way that they write code. They are essentially just talking to a software engineer to do things for you. But soon that is coming to every job and every piece of SaaS software. In terms of the risks, though, it should be okay as long as you still make the good fundamental assumptions in how you set up your system. So if the API is secure, anything using that API should be controlled. So if you've got access control, you've got good logging inside the software, you make sure it's rate limited, et cetera. You can still stop a malicious, incompetent AI interaction in the same way that you could an incompetent or malicious user.
Yeah.
An MCP's a model context protocol, essentially a wrapper for AI systems around APIs.
Yep.
The security is not in the MCP; it's in the APIs immediately, and that just flows through.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said MCP, because the guy, we were talking about this, like I said, on this recent episode. And he mentioned that. So it was the first time I heard the word, and now at least I know what it means. So that's kind of cool.
Also, so MCP is model context protocol. Yep. It's essentially, imagine you've got some APIs. Sorry, for you or your audience, whoever wishes to know. You've got some APIs, and those are ways that you can interact with that piece of software.
Yep.
Those are very anal pieces of code, because they've got very specific requests and specific responses in ways that you'd usually write a curl command or use Postman or some other software.
Yeah.
MCP essentially has a description of what those endpoints like to receive and respond with, and ability, some documentation, and a link to some large language model. So that you take in your request, calls the large language model, works out the documentation on these API endpoints, turns it into a request, responds, and keeps going. And that's what happens. Now there's a few more steps there. MCP is a little bit old news. A few months ago, you had MCP apps and MCP UI. So MCP UI was the ability to do this wrapper and then create front-end components for SaaS software. So I want to interact with a system, and instead of generating natural language, I want to generate front-end code which shows in my browser, maybe drop-downs or like a graph. better ways than text. MCP apps are like this, but pushed further for more front-end work.
Got it.
So it's crazy everywhere.
It is crazy, but it's a really good explanation for what this is. I want to go back to something you said earlier, right? Because I've been thinking about this too. I want to get your perspective on this. Mm-hmm. You said that developers are now writing code in a way where it's going to be more like you're talking to the accountant as opposed to interacting with the accountant system, right?
Yes.
But does that mean, and I'm simplifying to make a point, right? So again, just tell me where I'm wrong or tell me where it becomes like sort of a deeper or more sophisticated conversation. But does that mean that the AI at some level is going to become the UI? And if it is, does that mean that the way the code gets written, because every piece of software still today has a UI with it, but does it mean that developers are going to spend less time making that UI actually super great, which is what they used to do before, right? The workflow actually mattered. Whereas now it matters less, excuse me, and the AI becomes UI because you just talk to it like it's a person, and then it goes and does the thing because it already knows what the API is, and it goes in and does the things and then comes back with a result. Is that fair?
You are absolutely correct. UIs are going to be less important. What is a UI? It is a user interface.
Yeah.
It is a way for humans to interact with machines because we can't interact easily with APIs. But what is the best user interface to have? What is the most natural for humans? It's another human.
Yeah.
It's how we like to talk. So that is the future of software. It is also the key insight, in my opinion, about why companies like Google and with ChatGPT's product from OpenAI did so well. It is the one simple box. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
Write in the question, get a response. And we are going to see, in my opinion, a convergence of almost all software to that ideal. And hopefully one day like Cortana in Halo, where she pops up and it's even more human. But this is also the vision of companies like, specifically very much for Google, but also for Claude and OpenAI. OpenAI has MCP apps, which is the way to connect every software into OpenAI. In Google, it's even bigger because they have their suite of products. So you have Docs, you have email, you have slides, you have search, and they have their own model.
Yeah, Gemini, yeah.
That's all going to be connected through a single interface of what do you want to do today.
But do you think we're going to get to a point then where, again, in the old days, right, in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, like you'd see some senior manager walk over to his secretary and say, please write a letter that says this thing. Please send it to, Bob or whatever at this address. And at the end of it, please invite them and, their family out to dinner with me. Mm-hmm. And write this in the most professional way possible. And are we suggesting then that, like, sooner rather than later, we'll just be able to go to Gemini and just talk to it like that and say, do that thing for me? Say it again.
Sorry, I already do that.
Yeah, you already. That's my point, though, right? I just want to make it clear that, but it's not just for email. Email is actually kind of simple in a way, in relative terms. But like, write a document that does this thing. Come when you're done, let me know, or email it back to me, and then I'll make changes, then send it back to you. Like, this is just going to be the way stuff gets done. And here's the other question that I had. Like, I feel like a company like Google has an edge because they have all of these products that are already integrated. And because they've got 20, I don't know what the date is, right, when they started this, but they've also got 20 something years of data. Have you ever read the book? What is it called? Like Inside the Googleplex or something? I can't remember the name of it. But it just said that Google's going to have this overriding advantage because of all the data that they've gathered over time and all the search information that they have and all the intentions that people have. I don't know. I'm just curious what you think about this.
I don't know about the data, but the ability of their own model with the search, with the general software that people are using in databases, be it email suites, that combination is a really big trifecta, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's I was going to go somewhere further that what you described about talking to the secretary, that exists today. That's the way a lot of people are already doing their work. I can interact via email with the models stable and say, hey, process this invoice payment, etc. Go off. And it goes through the flow, finds the reconciliation, does it, sends me the email back saying, hey, that's now in in the software, I could spin up a system in Nathan, N8N, for doing other flows, for doing bookings. But we can even abstract even further than that.
Tell me.
We can even think, have an agent above that saying, what would you do if you were me in this case? And a thing came in, and you abstract away that part as well. So, let's say that I receive an email inviting me for dinner, make the educated guess about whether I want to or not, and then book it for me. So it's like the super advanced, the secretary who knows you really well.
Yeah.
And makes that decision automatically for you.
Yeah.
And even go through that process.
Yeah, like a really well-informed PA, like knows exactly what you want. It doesn't have, like if they've been working for you for 10 years or whatever, and they just know your schedule and your taste inside and out. Yeah. I presume it's easier to train the agentic AI to do that. But I like this idea of abstracting it even to a layer above that. Not just do this thing if this happens, but what should I do, or what do you think I would do if this happens? And then play that thing out too. Can I ask you this though? Mm-hmm. I feel like you and I are inside of a little bit of a tech bubble, right? Because you're doing this obviously every single day, and you've been doing this for most of your adult life, yeah? At least thinking about software, thinking about building stuff like that with, with technology. And I've been doing the same thing, just, in a stupider way, because I'm not nearly as smart as you are. But you know what I mean? Like I've been involved in tech for like 30 years. So having these conversations and understanding what this abstraction means and how to interact with it, for us, I think is relatively straightforward. I always like to use like my mom as an example of like, when do you think it gets to a point where the AI is so sophisticated and the AI becomes the UI in a way that just everybody can use it that way, and it just feels like normal? Do you know what I mean? Because we're not there yet, are we?
No. And again, I bring that back to Google's kickoff of search. And why they did so well, it's that simplicity of user experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Same with GPT and GPT-3 and ChatGPT. What we're speaking about is workflows and automations.
Yeah.
Anything that can be described in a flowchart, no matter how fuzzy or complex those steps can be, can now be automated.
Yeah.
Now, it is very, very close to the ability to set up all of those flows through natural language, through a basic interaction as a conversation, as though I'm telling someone, here's what you could do on a day-to-day basis. At the moment, it's a little bit tricky. You've got to draw the flow chart. You've got to describe it out.
Yep.
Soon that's going to be abstracted. And it's going to be, hey, describe what you do the one audio recording. Here's what I want you to do on a day-to-day basis. And it makes it. Right now, it's restricted to people who can, work with OpenClaw, work with Stable, work with Nathan.
Exactly.
But the way we're going is this is going to open up. It's going to be great. And we're going to have to find something to do.
We are. No, but so again, I love the fact that you said that. So I like to go back to like the onset of widely available electricity. Do you know what I mean? And I know that a lot of people have conversations like this, but I just want to make this point. The onset of electricity as a thing that like regular people could use on a regular basis meant that things like washing machines could be invented, right? And then once we had like all these things compressed time and gave humans more leisure. Like the reasons why there are tennis clubs and golf clubs and stuff that everybody can use is because people just had way more leisure time. And even if you go back to the 1960s and early 70s, surfing was a thing that took off for a bunch of reasons. One was television made it available for people to see that you could actually surf, because most people didn't even know it existed, particularly if they didn't live on the coast. But second of all, people just had way more free time. And I fundamentally believe that we're going to have way more free time. We may have fewer humans, to be fair, but we'll definitely have more free time. Sorry, I feel like I interrupted you.
No, I hope you're right. We're going to have a peak population later this century, maybe. But I don't know. I don't know if we're going to have more free time, because the general history in the last few years has just use it to become more efficient. For developers, it's now you can write things 10 times faster.
Yeah.
Do it. But soon this is going to cause a sea change across white collar work.
For sure.
Anyone who's sitting in their office doing a paperwork, who can describe their jobs in terms of flowcharts, this was going to get automated, and we can. I don't know. I know what will happen. You're going to get the equivalent of the Luddite movement, who wanted to smash up the machines, not because they didn't like technology, but because it was causing so much societal harm.
Disruption, yeah.
Yeah. But people weren't made to wear white collars. So it is for the best. It's just going to be a bit choppy in the next 10 years, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And look, I've actually had the experience of automating myself out of a job. So I know exactly what this feels like. Yeah, when I was at Goldman Sachs, Goldman bought a company, I forget the name, it was Hull Trading, I think, and then renamed it internally to Goldman Sachs Algorithmic Trading. So all the stuff that I was doing manually, and some of the trades that we did were very, very sophisticated with a whole bunch of parameters in them that frankly were very hard to keep track of. Even in a spreadsheet with real-time feeds in it. But at some point, the algo could know whether a stock was up or down 5%, whether it was more than 25% of daily average traded volume, and all these other things that were restrictions that were put on the trading. And we ended up at the end of the day, we built all these systems and then realized all we're doing now is monitoring this stuff and making small tweaks and changes.
Yeah, that's fine as long as you know. When your boss finds out, that's when you're in trouble.
Oh, no, the boss, believe me, definitely knew. And we were senior enough. Look, when I was doing it and building all this stuff, because you said you have to know the workflow, I spent a ton of time again, with the IT teams that were building this stuff saying, here's exactly what I want this to look like. And let's automate every little piece of it so that, and again, we could go from doing $200 million a day of business to doing $3.5 billion a day of business because the efficiencies were so much larger that we could literally do like 15 or 20 times more business every day. Yeah. So I saw this happen in real time. And at the end of the day, when there were big market disruptions, people actually did get fired. Yeah, but it just is what it is.
It's going to be difficult for some countries in particular as well.
Yeah.
One that's it's a bit. It's gonna affect some countries who are going through the industrialization process, especially if they've got a big BPO center. So Philippines is one that is going to be really affected by this. They've got 20% of their workforce in BPO.
Yeah,
this is a really key area of concern. If they're using the AI systems correctly, they can try and climb the value chain to provide more services to the clients. But you have to do this quickly, or else the client will do it themselves, and you've lost them.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to be, again, some of these very big and large industrialized countries as well, particularly where you said like people are not meant to wear white collars, but there's a ton of white collar work, and we don't have to go through that list. There are going to be problems. Okay, before I let you go, let's talk about the last topic here. As the hype, there's so much hype around AI right now, but where do you think the durable value in AI will actually live? Is it going to be in the model, in the workflow, in the data, in the trust? Like, where do you think this is going to live?
It's going to be about the trust with the data, in my opinion. The next revolutions, I think, aren't just going to be about having better models. It's being able to prove that the data that's being created and being processed is accurate. For example, earlier this week, Australian bank, I think, just admitted themselves to the police for $1 billion of fraud.
Oh, no.
People at the home look up, second Australian bank to have a problem with this in the last few years.
Oh, no.
And what's happening is people are using AI systems to doctor documents. This is the sort of problem that needs to now be solved. It's one that Staple works on very actively.
I was going to say, this is Staple's wheelhouse, right?
Yeah. We dropped out of the foundational model game. We're not going to be Anthropic on that one. But we do know the importance of data integrity, especially in regulated businesses.
For sure.
So being able to show how decisions were made, including decisions by AI, how multiple pieces of disparate data came together to make a decision, being able to track that, being able to make sure that's tamper-proof and evidenced with output is going to be vital. Otherwise, it's just everything moving a million miles an hour, AI doing things, and an answer popping out. And a few years from now, you're going to look at, the system which you built, which is wonderful things. You built it internally and solved the problems. and you're not going to know quite why everything happened.
Right.
And that's a danger for mob business. It's a real danger for regulated industries.
Well, for sure, because if you violate a regulation, you have other risks that are in some cases not quantifiable. I always like to make the case, again, just to simplify things, not because I believe this is 100% true, but it's close enough to make the point that I feel like we're still at a point right now with some of the large language models where it's like an intern that kind of knows a lot but doesn't know everything, right? Or a junior employee who's just graduated from college but knows a lot but doesn't know everything. And you ask them a question and they're just like, they just give you an answer and you're like, are you sure? That's really the truth. But humans have the capacity to just go, I don't know. Let me get more information and I'll come back to you. Do you know what I mean? If they're actually trained properly. And I'm curious if there's a way to kind of implement that inside of the large language models, or at least the way people use them, like you said, so that they can trust the information that they're getting better.
So trusting the accuracy of a decision is one thing.
Yep.
I ask you, what color socks are you wearing? I can't see your socks, and you tell me red or blue. I am not going to, and ultimately, I think, determine truth.
Right.
In the model, or track that. But what you can do is we can track who said what at what times, with what input and what output, and where you were and when you said it.
Right.
And that, I think, is something that is going to start getting baked into systems. So if we do go in the future and it turns out you lied about the color socks, who knows? We know where this piece of fraudulent behavior came from, and you can stick that thing to the lie. And that's a really big step.
Yeah, it's gigantic, because I use the word easily, but I always speak in relative terms. Then it becomes easily auditable. You're like, everything was true up until point whatever, X, and then something happened. And then you can trace back what that thing was that happened and where it happened and why it happened and who made it happen or who did it. And now you know where that, I'm going to say, misinformation or fraud came from, right?
And if it's logged properly, the model, the seed, the input, the hashed input, the output, the location, everything is trackable. This is the idea of keeping all metadata with structured data.
Yep.
We call this concept metastructure.
I was just going to say metastructured data, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that these things can travel together forever, and the idea of logs separating from data goes. By the way, this is not a new concept. This concept has existed for 20 years. Richard Hickey, I think, is one of the famous people who talked about in database science about how databases are quite badly designed, in that it's position-based facts. This line is updated to represent a fact.
Right.
Updated it goes. We have this concept of how we should be able to track things or lose information, because we are so used to the idea of memory being precious. We have the idea that every single kilobyte of memory on our device, we can't use it up. In 1997, we had Game Boys, 8 kilobytes of memory. Now an iPhone 16 megabytes.
Gigabytes.
Oh, gigabytes. Sorry, gigabytes.
Gigabytes.
That's 2 million times more. 2 million Game Boys, I think, is probably like 5 times the length of Singapore.
Yeah.
That's how much memory we have, and that's in RAM. That's the worst kind of available memory. Sorry, the best kind of available memory, the worst time to try and get.
Right.
Storage, we have everything. You can know the history of everything and the current state right now. It is not a problem.
No.
So you can keep this.
So do you think databases would have been designed differently if, I think, who was it? Was it Steve Jobs, or was it was it Steve Jobs that said 128K is more memory than we'll ever need when they were designing the original Macintosh?
Yeah, I think that was one. In databases, there's always been the kind of two major conflicting forces of consistency versus availability.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that is, I think that is maybe a separate thing to a history, and a history of what has happened. We just assume that don't even bother with that. We haven't got the space. That isn't a problem.
Got it. So one of the, I feel like I could just keep talking to you about this because it's so interesting and you know so much more about it than I do and I have so many questions. But just one more thing, and then I'll let you go if that's okay.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about long context and why it matters? Do you know what I mean? Because I think it was Anthropic.
In context windows, in when you're using a system and you get halfway through the prompting, it starts to go off the wrong way, and why that happens.
No, but this idea that if let's say you and I, what is it? It's March right now, right? Let's say in June, you and I get together again, we start chatting. All I really have to say to you is, hey, do you remember that conversation we had back in March? And somewhere in the recesses of your brain, you'll be like, we talked about this, we talked about that, we talked about this, we talked about that. And then I can go back into it and say, has your opinion on that thing that we talked about changed, or what's new, or all that kind of stuff? And you have this massively long context. I don't need to run through with you everything that that we've spoken about. And, in the initial rollout of ChatGPT, I think it was GPT-3, I think you were saying,
yeah.
You could literally ask it something, but you couldn't give it a ton of information because it just couldn't handle all of that info for a bunch of different reasons, right? But now it can handle this much longer context and remember things in a way that it couldn't before.
Yes, it can. Well, people still get themselves into trouble with this.
Go ahead.
Where they go down a conversation chain, and eventually the stuff up in the past of that chain starts filling the context window of the model.
Right. And
your model starts to drift.
Yeah, that happened to me today, actually, but yeah.
You also you get all sorts of weird kind of drift in models. Usually the way to is fix, reset, and restart. And you just this is simply okay. Maybe this is a little bit beyond my core expertise, but this is an issue of the size of context windows that can be input into a model. Because when you're using if you're using GPT 5.4, I think it's the latest one, that model is not trained specifically for you. It has some amounts of context window from your previous conversations, and it is using that to give the answers in the way that it thinks you like. So that's what's happening there. It's a little bit of although I'm pretty educated in machine learning, I'm really a quantum physicist.
I like how you say that. That's embarrassing. Do you know what I mean? It's so great. Sorry, I love it.
There's a reason I moved to AI, because the first public key cryptography algorithm, Bennett Bassard, 1984.
Got it.
For quantum. So we've been in quantum multi-party key distribution cryptography since 1984.
One
How many quantum computers do we have?
None.
Well, arguably some, but not many.
None really, functionally.
So I finished my PhD, took one look at transformers and was like, this is better.
Yeah. At least because one of the things, and again, I said this on one of my episodes recently, and I get this from the National Football League, right, in the United States, and they say the best ability is availability. So you could do quantum physics, but there are no quantum computers, or not enough. But the transformers are available. They're there. You can use them and build stuff with them, and that's cool. That's sort of cool, I think. Yeah.
No regrets on moving to AI. One that was right. I could talk about this all day long. Like, what happens when AI goes from moving in the digital world to making stuff in the physical world?
Yeah.
What happens to society then is nuts. I can talk about document workflows. This is super interesting.
Yeah, no, we could go on forever. Okay, look, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to thank you again for doing this. Dr. Joshua Kettlewell, co-founder and CTO at Staple. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This was awesome. Thanks for doing it, man.
Pleasure. Anytime. Hope to see you again.
Okay, that's it today for ATP Insights. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Dan Ternes and to Dr. Joshua Kettlewell as well. Gives us a thumbs up on the video. It really helps us in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and follow us on all of our socials, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Leave us comments anywhere you want on all of those platforms, and let us know in the comments if there's anything else you would want us to discuss on our upcoming shows. We want to do an AMA. I've said that before. I'll say it again. If you have questions for us, leave them in the comments, either on LinkedIn or on X. We'll be looking for it there, and on YouTube. And we just love to answer your questions directly. As I said, if you want, you can just email me directly at michael@asiatechpodcast.com. My name is Michael Waitz. Bye for now. Thanks again.